Dr. Moiya McTier is an astrophysicist, folklorist, and science communicator based in New York City. She's written a fictional novel, given hundreds of talks about science around the world, helped design exhibits for the New York Hall of Science, and is currently working on a popular science book about the history of the Milky Way for Grand Central Publishing. Moiya's favorite way to combine her unique set of expertise is to build a fictional world based on facts and science, which she does through workshops, classes, and her podcast, Explore. You can learn more about Moiya and her work on her website, moiyamctier.com. Everybody give a hand and welcome Dr. Moiya McTier.
Oh, thank you. So good to be here. I love the NAC. I've been a part of the NAC family since 2014 when I was first a student, and it's always good to be back. So thank you for inviting me. I want this to be kind of interactive. So at different points in the talk, I'm going to be asking you questions. It would probably be easiest to put your answers to those questions in the chat. I have it up. I'll be monitoring it. And if you have any questions of your own at any point during this talk, feel free to put that in the chat as well. And I will try to get to it as soon as I can. So here tonight, I'm going to be trying to give you some practical tips for how to survive life in the ivory tower. Just a quick, show of X's in the chat. How many of you are either in grad school now or are planning on going to grad school in the future? Okay, we see lots of X's, some people in grad school now. That's great. Congratulations on either getting into grad school if you're already there or on making the decision to go to grad school. If you're considering it, that's cool too. That is a great stage to be in. Here tonight, I just want to give you some tips for how you might not just survive in the ivory tower, but hopefully thrive. That's part of what the NAC is here to help us achieve, right? First, I want to start with a little bit of background about my life, take you on a journey through my academic career. So I graduated from high school in 2012. I went to Harvard right after I graduated from high school, but I didn't know that I was interested in astronomy at first. I went to Harvard thinking maybe I'll study physics, maybe anthropology, but this is actually kind of embarrassing. I could not physically find the anthropology building, so I did not take any anthropology classes. And through a kind of circuitous route, I eventually found my way to astronomy in 2014. This is my sophomore year of college. It was sophomore fall. One of my teammates, actually, I played rugby when I got to college. One of my teammates begged me to go with her to an introductory astronomy class, and I wasn't interested. I sat in the back of the room. I wasn't going to pay attention, but the professor said we'd get free pizza every week if we signed up for the class. And I said, I don't know how I feel about space, but I do know how I feel about free carbs, so I'm definitely going to sign up for this course. And by the end of it, I thought astronomy was so cool. I thought, wow, we can be studying things millions or even billions of light years away from our dusty little corner of space here on Earth. So I thought astrophysics seems really cool. I applied to research internships for that summer. I luckily got accepted to NRAOs and then into the NAC. At the time, you didn't apply to the NAC separately. And once I got to Charlottesville for my NAC summer, I met a woman there, Tanya Burchell, who was working in the EPO office, the Education and Public Outreach office. And I thought that her job was also really cool. So similar to Dr. Shields, I thought, oh, astrophysics is interesting, but science communication and outreach, that seems like it might be up my alley too. So I had these dual interests that I had to kind of reckon with throughout the rest of my academic career. In 2015, I went back to campus. I did more research. I collected as many research projects as I could get my hands on. And by the end of that year, I figured, okay, astrophysics seems like it's what I want to do. I'll apply to grad school, get the PhD, and then do research, I guess, or be a professor. And then I graduated in 2016 and immediately started grad school. This is a choice that some people make. It might not be for everyone. Some people need to take time off. That was not for me. I didn't know what else I would do in between undergrad and grad school. So I went to Columbia for my PhD program right away, and I loved it. I was thrilled by the amount of independence I had in my research compared to undergrad. I loved being in a new city. I loved taking new classes. I was super excited about astronomy and academia in 2016. You might see where this story is going. In 2017, things got a little bit more difficult. I was struggling with my grad classes. I started teaching my own lab for undergraduates for the first time. I was applying to grants. I had a really complicated relationship with my advisor. We've since kind of worked it out, but it was not a good time for me. 2017 was also around the time that I really started to reckon with the amount of inequity and diversity issues in the astronomy community. And because I still had all of that youthful energy in my second year of grad school, I thought, oh, I can fix it. And so I started putting together talks and bringing in speakers and trying to get reading clubs going in my department. And some people showed up, but you might be able to guess that the people who showed up were the people who already knew these things anyway. And after I saw that, I really got disillusioned with the astronomy community and academia in general. So I went into my third year of grad school in a much worse place than I started my second year. In 2018, I had really long bouts of clinical depression. I started asking myself, what's the point of grad school? What's the point of research? I am struggling so much and no one is helping me, even though I feel like people can see it on my face every time they pass me in the hallway. So 2018, my third year of grad school, was really tough, which probably contributed to my decision in 2019, in my fourth year of grad school, to leave academia. I realized that science communication was what I really wanted to do in my life. There are ways to do both science communication and research, but I was just done. I was done with research and I wanted to leave academia as soon as possible. And once I realized that, and I looked around at the people that I had access to and saw that they were all research academics, I knew that I would need to find my own mentors in outreach and communication. In 2020 and 2021, I ramped up my science communication career. I started giving more talks and I started my own podcast, and I did all of these things so that when I defended in April of this year, I could start doing science communication full time and get paid for it. And so I decided to leave academia, and now I am kind of tangentially related to it so that I can stay in touch with all of you. So that is my career path so far, but I want to highlight the fact that no path is linear. I think Dr. Shields illustrated this perfectly in her talk as well, but linear paths are especially out of the cards for a lot of people of color, Black and brown people, especially women and people who present as such. Because there are obstacles that are put in our path, and then we have to veer away from those obstacles unless we want to just be stopped in our tracks. So we have these topsy-turvy, curvy paths through our careers, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. If anything, just like Dr. Shields said, I think our kind of alternative curvy paths can make us stronger. They can give us skills that other people in academia might not have. Over the course of my grad school career, I saw that I definitely struggled a lot with my mental health, and so many other students in my program did as well. And in 2018, which just happened to be the year that I was diagnosed with depression for the first time, Nature came out with a study showing that grad students are more likely than the general population to have both anxiety and depression. The estimates back then were that we're something like 6 times more likely than someone in the general population to have anxiety and depression. I want to say right off the bat that this is not our fault. It's not your fault if you're struggling with mental health. It doesn't have to be something to the level of going to therapy or getting a diagnosis. If you are struggling at all, if you feel stressed, if you feel overwhelmed, it is not your fault. There are processes and systems in place in academia that make it so that people struggle. Academia literally was not built for people like us, and it wasn't built to comfort. It wasn't even really built to teach in a lot of ways. It was built as a machine to produce more knowledge, and machine production is not always best for human health and happiness. So those systems and processes that are in place are things like imposter phenomenon. This is not me saying that academia is like breeding little imposter phenomenon robots for us, but there are a lot of things that academia does. There are a lot of aspects of our culture in academia that lead to imposter phenomenon. Black and brown people in academia also have to deal with heavier cognitive burdens than a lot of their peers. We all have to deal with the unhealthy work-life balance in academia. This is something that is expected of us. It's a burden that is put on us. We have a lack of support and understanding from our family, from our advisors, from other people in our cohorts, in our graduate programs. And academia just has a kind of unwelcoming nature. It's super competitive. It's really hierarchical. You know, there's undergrad, grad student, postdoc, faculty, and like there's a ladder that you have to climb. The hiring and admissions processes are pretty opaque. They aren't very transparent in what they're looking for. And that's kind of intentional. If you look at the ways that white supremacy gets kept around, it's through processes like this. Keep people competitive, make it so that people can't see what the clear expectations are, and make things really hierarchical so that everyone can look around themselves and compare themselves to everyone else. So these are the reasons, just some of the reasons that we might be more likely to struggle with mental health. And again, it is not your fault. It's because academia, for many of us, is like the bad place. So in the rest of the talk, I'm going to be going through each of these barriers in academia and give you concrete, actionable advice for how you might combat it. But first, I want us to do a little exercise. I want us all to find our why. Knowing your motivation can help you through the toughest times. And this is for anything. You know, I have this same slide in talks where I talk about science communication techniques and world building techniques. And this is just something that I think is generally useful. So I would like each of you to take a moment to think about why you're in academia. Are you here because you just love astronomy and you want to learn more about it? Are you here because you think that it's a good career step for you, that it'll help you climb up the socioeconomic ladder? Are you here because it's a nice way to make money? Are you here because it's a kind of cushy barrier between undergrad and this quote unquote real world? If any of you are comfortable putting your motivations in the chat, I would love to see them. I will tell you that when I applied to grad school in 2015, in my senior year of undergrad, I was doing it because I had a question in mind, a specific one. I wanted to know where in the Milky Way galaxy habitable planets are most likely to form. And that is the topic of my dissertation. So I went through grad school with that specific motivator in mind. But not everyone has that same motivation. Yay. I love physics and collaborating with people. Great. Grad school. Awesome for that. I've always wanted a PhD my entire life, and I'm doing this for my mom and sister. That's really beautiful. I want to discover more about faraway galaxies. My family is part of my motivation. Yes. And also developing opportunities for Central American Caribbean students. I love working on hard problems to solve and travel. Yes, that's a great reason to get into grad school, especially astronomy grad school, because we get to, you know, in the before times, go to all these cool conferences in super awesome and sometimes remote places. I encourage you to hold on to these motivations. I even would encourage you to write it on a piece of paper and stick it behind your desk or on your computer, somewhere where you can easily see it. Because when times get tough, it's good to remind yourself of why you're putting yourself through this struggle. And if at any time your why, your motivation stops applying, there is absolutely no shame in quitting. If you are no longer getting the same joy, if you're no longer scratching the same itch with grad school that you used to, then you don't have to keep going through it. You don't owe anyone that. And that's something that I'll return to a few times in this talk. All right, let's go through those list of barriers. The first one was imposter phenomenon, which you may have heard called imposter syndrome. A lot of people are moving away from that particular phrase because syndrome implies that something is wrong with you. But so many people experience imposter phenomenon that it's not something necessarily wrong with you. It is not, like a disease or a psychological ailment in the same way as others might be. Hundreds of studies have been done on imposter phenomenon for the last 40 years. One of the first papers in 1985 came out saying that 70% of people will experience imposter phenomenon in their lifetime. So if you look at this joke pie chart that I made, you'll see most people have imposter phenomenon and know it and will say it. A lot of people have imposter phenomenon, but either don't know it, don't have the words to say it, or they just won't admit it to themselves. And then there is a small fraction of the population with just unhealthy, godly levels of confidence who do not have, I shouldn't say unhealthy, I'm not trying to judge, but they do not have imposter phenomenon. They are definitely in the minority here. There's a lot of research that goes into what factors in a person's life might lead them to experience imposter phenomenon. And what they have found is that it's more common in people who have marginalized identities. That applies to a lot of us here. It's also more common in people who have achieved a lot of success, which sucks, right? Because the more success you have, the more likely you are to have this thing that makes you think your success isn't due to your own talent and skills. And this comic illustrates that really well. So at the top it says, "This is Dr. Adams. She's a social psychologist and the world's top expert on imposter syndrome." And you would think that Dr. Adams would respond like, "Yeah, I'm great. I have a lot of expertise." But no. Instead, she says, "Ha, don't be silly." She laughs it off. She says, "There are lots of scholars who have made more significant." And then she realizes because she is the world's top expert on imposter syndrome, that she has it. And she was demonstrating it in that moment. There are so many people who we would recognize as incredibly successful and just like top people in their fields who have publicly expressed that they experience imposter phenomenon. Maya Angelou, Tom Hanks, Michelle Obama, all of these people have said in public statements that they feel like imposters, that they feel like they aren't as good at what they do as everyone else thinks they are. So if you feel like you have imposter phenomenon, then you are in excellent company. I want to go through this short quiz to see if you have imposter phenomenon, to see if you are in fact an owl among a bunch of cats in a basket. But the first question, are you an imposter? That's actually a misnomer. This is a wrong question to ask because the answer is no. None of you are actually imposters. So here, the real question I want to ask is, do you feel like an imposter? So I'm going to ask you a few questions. These are taken from one of many tests online that you can find to kind of assess your imposter phenomenon level. And I want you privately to yourself to answer yes or no for each of these questions. Do you often attribute your success to luck? Do you feel like it's not actually your talent, but you're just lucky to have done what you have done? Do you think that you have tricked people into thinking you're smarter than you actually are? Do you feel like you can't possibly live up to people's expectations of you? Do you feel like you're just going to be letting them down? Number 4, do you feel like the people who hired/accepted you made a mistake? Number 5, do you feel like you should have accomplished more by now? Number 6, do you have a hard time accepting compliments or praise? Do you do that thing where you just get really shy and blush and look away, or you try to downplay whatever compliment someone just gave you? And number 7, do you feel like everyone around you is smarter than you are? So you don't have to share your answers to those questions, but I will. I will say that I said yes to 6 of these 7 questions. And the only reason I didn't say yes to number 3, the one about living up to people's expectations, is because my imposter phenomenon is so strong that I feel like people shouldn't have high expectations of me anyway. So I can live up to people's obviously low expectations of my no talent self. I say these things, but I know they're not true. I know they're not true for me or you. And this is the hardest part of imposter phenomenon. Our brains will come up with evidence to support the imposter's thoughts. And it's really hard to fight those, but there are ways that you can do it. So how can you fight imposter thoughts? I've come up with an appropriate acronym for this. Starry. We're all stars and we can all be starry. And by being starry, you can fight your imposter phenomenon. So the first S in this is to set realistic goals. One of the reasons that so many of us feel imposter phenomenon is because we're judging ourselves against unrealistic expectations. We think that we need to be the top of our class, or that we need to publish 10 papers a year, or that we need to give 15 talks at conferences. Those are all super unrealistic expectations. Of course, what's realistic for one person might not be realistic for another. And so this is a super personal exercise, but this is what you need to do first. You need to set those realistic goals. And that can be similar to the exercise that Dr. Shields shared, where you think about what you want to do and you lay out different possibilities for yourself. You can think about setting your goals in that way. Or with the planner that she mentioned, where you know you're not going to get to everything, but it's a matter of prioritizing. The T in Starry is to talk about it. Talk about both your successes and your failures. And this is important to talk about both, because so many people, this is on Instagram, on social media, this is on the Grapevine or the grad cafe that I remember checking too often when I was waiting to hear back from grad school admissions committees. So many people just talk about their successes. And when you do that, it means that everyone else is just comparing themselves to the most successful, most polished version of you. So if everyone starts talking about both their successes and their failures, then everyone can set more realistic expectations for themselves. This is kind of a tragedy of the commons problem, where we need everyone to participate in this talk section. And once we do, then everyone will be better off. The A is to ask for what you need from interactions with others. And this, I think, is one of the hardest steps in the process. In my second year, I told you that I was really struggling in my relationship with my advisor. He would do things like come into my office when I wasn't expecting it and feel like we should meet whenever he was ready, or he would miss meetings that we had scheduled, or when I sent him my paper drafts, he would edit in the text without telling me what he changed. And that really bothered me. And so I had to ask him. I sat him down at the beginning of our third year working together, and I told him what I needed. I said, I would rather schedule meetings ahead of time rather than you just coming into my office. I would rather send you PDFs of my papers and have you comment on them. And then I set out other outlines for what I expected of our interactions with each other. And I was lucky enough to have an advisor who took that feedback from me and actually ran with it. I hope that you all are lucky enough to have similarly kind and open-minded advisors. But it's really important to ask for what you need from people, because they aren't mind readers. And like Dr. Shields said, the worst they can do is say no. The first R is to remind yourself that your worth does not come from your work. You are not worth the amount that you produce. Instead, you already have an inherently high value, a high worth, just by virtue of being a human being alive walking on this world today. So remind yourself of that, that your work is not tied up in your worth. They aren't equal or even correlated at all. The second R is to remember when you felt good about yourself, because imposter phenomenon can drag you down into this spiral of self-loathing and self-hate. And the one way to fight that is to pick yourself up with an actual packet of evidence. So put it in pictures where you're like, I look fine, or write letters to yourself when you're feeling at your best, or letters from your friends. I have in my packet a letter that Tiara wrote to me a few years ago. And when I'm feeling really down about myself, I open it up and I read it. And my friend telling me that I am awesome and a badass is a lot more effective than me telling myself. Proof of good news, like report cards or acceptance, like when your papers get accepted to journals, just put a packet of that together so that you always have this to refer back to. And then the why is to have a year of yes, where you agree to do any professional thing that you were asked to do. The year of yes was super important for me because I was asked to do all of these things. I was invited to give talks, and I was invited to do a comedy show, a stand-up comedy show. And usually, because of my imposter phenomenon, I would think that I wasn't qualified to do those things, or that I wasn't good enough, or that I wasn't ready, blah, blah, blah. But during the year of yes, it didn't matter if I thought I was good enough or qualified or ready. I had to say yes. And then I just had to prepare. And because imposter phenomenon is a lie, I obviously was ready and prepared and good enough and all of that. It worked out. So here's just a little bit more information about my year of yes. Oh, Tiara did a year of yes. That's awesome. I'm so glad that it helped you get through grad school. So my year of yes was an academic year of yes from September 2018 to 2019. And I intentionally aimed all of my year of yes at science communication opportunities. So I used it to find my SciComm style. I decided that on the spectrum from like Bill Nye being goofy and wacky and whimsical to Carl Sagan being kind of awe-inspiring and grandiose, I'm definitely closer to the Bill Nye side of things. I used that year to find my SciComm goals. I decided that my personal mission in life is to make science and scientists seem more relatable through comedy and through folklore. And I decided that I wanted to mix SciComm and social justice whenever I could. So I gave this talk called Space in Chains, where I talked about the history of slavery through the lens of different astronomical events. Like during the years of slavery, this is how far the Milky Way traveled. This is how much mass the Earth gained through cosmic dust falling on our surface. And my year of yes was really helpful in opening myself up to new opportunities. Like I said, I agreed to do a stand-up comedy show. I would never have considered myself a comedian before this year, but I did it, and then I did it again, and I felt really good about it. I started working with the World Science Festival. I started my own podcast and live show, and I got this random email one day from a literary agent who asked me if I had ever considered writing a book. Obviously, I have. I love writing. But if it was outside my year of yes, I probably would have replied to him saying, oh, no, I'm still in grad school. I'm not ready. But I had to say yes. And then I met with him. I got a book deal, and now it's coming out next August. So a year of yes can be aimed at whatever you want. I did mine for SciComm. You can do yours for research or travel or working on your dissertation or giving talks. It can be whatever you want, but I've found it really helpful. Okay, so that was the imposter phenomenon part of the talk. Now moving on to cognitive burdens. These are the extra weight that we carry on our shoulders, on our mental shoulders, that a lot of our peers, a lot of our white male peers do not have to carry in academia. So the first of these burdens is feeling like you have to represent your whole identity group. Some of you may have heard the term stereotype threat. This link, and I will send out the PDF of these slides to all of you, because all of these blue links are resources that add more depth to what I'm saying. So this link will take you to an article about stereotype threat. There's also a book called Whistling Vivaldi that I read a few years ago about stereotype threat that's really helpful. But if you haven't heard of stereotype threat before, imagine that your brain is a multi-core computer. And for people of color, for women, for any group that has negative stereotypes associated with it, some of your cores, let's say, like you're an 8-core computer, 2 of your cores are being used worrying about not confirming the negative stereotypes about your group. And so there's a part of your brain that you can't use on the task at hand. So you're going to be, by definition, less productive than people who don't carry this same cognitive burden. There is a way to overcome stereotype threat, and there are several ways. One of them is through positive affirmations. So, for example, before I took the physics GRE, I wrote down an affirmation. This test, my score on this test says nothing about how smart I am or how good I am as a person. I wrote that down and I repeated it to myself many times while I was taking the physics GRE, and that helped a lot. But that article also has other ways that you can fight stereotype threat. Another cognitive burden comes from having to perform more emotional labor. Dr. Shields also touched on this. She said that we're often asked to do more mentoring, to serve on more committees and do more service that is not paid and takes time away from our paid research or teaching activities. You're often asked to educate your colleagues about racism or sexism or different prejudices or ongoings in the world that, they're adults, they could Google it themselves. But instead, oftentimes it's on us to teach them those things that they could easily learn on their own. We also carry the extra burden of personally experiencing the consequences of systemic racism and sexism and transphobia and all of these different things. We have to deal with the day-to-day reality of micro and macro aggressions. In the past year, last summer, I found it really hard to do any work because I was just reeling from all of the news around police brutality. And that's a cognitive burden that a lot of our colleagues don't have to bear. So these are just some examples of extra weight that we carry, but here are some ways that we can lighten the load. So I've already told you about the positive affirmations to fight stereotype threat, but another way to lighten these loads are to keep actual records of your accomplishments. This is like the packet of when you're feeling yourself, right? This is about facts. It's about the facts of what you can do as a person, and not about what you feel you can do as a person. Another thing that might help is learning how to say no. That way you can kind of reject the extra emotional labor that you're asked to do. And this link, I've found it to be really helpful. It's a person with it has template responses for like professional ways to say no to different opportunities. If you are like me and you have a hard time actually coming up with those responses yourself. And I think maybe the best way to lighten these cognitive loads is to create and then lean on a support network of peers. And this is one of the reasons that the NAC was so beneficial. I would say vital. The NAC was vital to me because it provided an amazing support network. I am still best friends with the people that I met at the NAC. They are going to be at my wedding. I love these people. And so create that network for yourself. And hopefully the NAC people that you've met here will be part of that network. Another process, another expectation in academia that really drags us down and affects our emotional and mental health is the unhealthy work-life balance that is expected of us in academia. There's no retirement age in academia. It's not like other fields where you reach 65 and then you're expected to go off and like focus on your hobbies or your family. In academia, people stay doing research in their offices until they die, right? So there's definitely baked into the culture a really unhealthy work-life balance, but there doesn't have to be. We can fight against that. So again, there is this relationship between unhealthy work-life balance and anxiety and depression. People who self-report having an unhealthy balance are more likely to feel anxious or depressed. I want to take a second to ask you, you don't have to respond, but in your head, how many hours per week do you think you should be working? And maybe that answer is based on the typical 9 to 5, 40-hour work week. Maybe that's based on an advisor that you've had in the past telling you that you can't make it in academia unless you're working 70 hours a week. No matter what your point of comparison is, it's probably unrealistic. And I would imagine that you set high goals for yourself in terms of working hours based on unrealistic expectations. So this study from the Bureau of Labor Statistics showed that people consistently overestimate the amount of time they work. So if you've ever had that advisor who says, oh, you can't make it in academia unless you're working 70 hours, they are not working 70 hours, and they almost definitely never did work 70 hours, because most people, if you look here in the graph, by the time people estimate that they've worked 70 hours a week, they're actually probably only working like 50 hours a week. They're overestimating their amount of time by 25 hours. So the more you work, the more you're going to overestimate the amount you work. And then that will create this perpetual cycle of everyone thinking they need to be working more, which is ridiculous, because here in the US, we already have an unhealthy work-life balance and an unhealthy expectation of work hours compared to other parts in the world. In parts of Europe, they talk about American work hours as unhealthy. We don't take enough breaks. We don't take enough vacation. We don't care about our sick days enough. So however much you think you need to be working, you really don't. Although I know it's hard to actually fight that impulse, but I am here giving you permission to work less. You can do it. In my first year of grad school, I made a rule about not working on the weekends unless I actively wanted to. And people told me it could not be done, but I did it. And so you can set your own boundaries. I also want to point out that over time, as you go through grad school or your postdoc or your faculty position, as you go, advance in your career, you'll get more efficient. You'll gain skills and experience, and it will take you less time to do tasks that it took you, like 10 hours to do before. My advisor sometimes likes to brag that he can write a paper in a day. I've seen one of these papers that he's written in a day. It wasn't that great. But he can still get all of his thoughts out like that. And that's because he has the time and the experience under his belt to be able to be that efficient. And if you stay on this course, you will also one day get that efficient. But also, everyone's efficiency is their own, and don't compare yourself to other people, because that's how you get these unhealthy expectations. But one way to fight this, one thing that I absolutely recommend you do, whether it be in grad school or postdoc or wherever you happen to be in your career, is to commit to at least one totally non-negotiable, all recreational activity per week. So in my first and second year of grad school, that was going to bar trivia every Tuesday. Every Tuesday at 6 p.m., I was going to go to Bar Thalia on Broadway, and I was going to be there for the rest of the night. And if I wasn't finished with my problem set, or if I wasn't done with reading or whatever, it didn't matter, because this was a non-negotiable commitment. I had commitment devices. I would go with friends who were not grad students, so they didn't have the same crappy work-life balance that I did. And that really helped, having one, the commitment on myself, and two, other people to hold me accountable. But there are ways to mitigate this unhealthy work-life balance by managing our time a little bit better. And here are just a few tips that maybe you've heard, maybe you haven't, but it always helps to hear them again. because I definitely need to be reminded. So the first tip is to know when you're most alert. When is your most high energy, most productive time? And then do your hardest work at that time. So I'm a night owl. I definitely get my second wind at 10 p.m. and it goes until 3 a.m. And that is my most productive time. So I did most of my writing on my book between 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. So find whatever time works for you and then do your hardest work then. On the flip side, do your easiest work first or when you have the least energy. This can be a nice way to ramp up to the hard work. So I start my day by answering emails because it's really easy, and just getting something done then gives me the little energy boost I need to do more work. Try scheduling similar work on the same days. So put all of your meetings on one day and then do all of your homework on another if you can. I know that we aren't always in control of our schedules, especially as grad students. Later on in your program, when you're done taking classes and teaching, hopefully you'll be able to have more control over your schedule. And then I would recommend scheduling similar activities on the same day. Also, work in digestible chunks and schedule in breaks, because if you don't put it on your calendar or whatever you use to manage your time, it's not going to happen. And breaks are super important. It might seem counterintuitive that by taking a break, you can be more productive, but it'll help re-energize you. It'll give your brain time to work on stuff in the background. I forget what it's called, but when you're not actively thinking about something, it's still working like on the back burner in your brain, which is why sometimes when you sleep on a problem set, when you go to sleep, you wake up the next morning and you know how to solve the problem that you spent hours struggling to solve the day before. So definitely schedule in breaks. This link will take you to a Pomodoro timer, which is how I live my life these days. I do it in 25-minute work chunks and then 5-minute breaks, but you could also do 20-10 or 15-15. It's totally up to you. Yeah, active recovery. Like when you're exercising, when you're an athlete, you can't work out every day. Your muscles would get shredded to bits. So your brain is similar in that it also needs a break. I'd recommend creating a scheduling system that works for you and actually use it. I love to color code things, so my calendar is color coded. There's a color for personal stuff. That's blue. You can see that I have therapy. So that's blue. The work times are orange. My meetings are purple, and my events are green. And I use this so that I can very easily see when I look at my calendar how the distribution of different tasks works out for each week. This doesn't have to be your system, but I highly recommend coming up with something that works for you. There's something called the Pareto principle or the 80-20 rule, and that says that 80% of the result, 80% of the outcome can be produced with 20% of the work. And that extra 20% of whatever job needs to get done, that's the hardest part. It's putting the finishing touches on something. So using this 80-20 rule, do the minimum amount of work that it takes to get most of the way to your goal. And then if you have time or if it's necessary, you can add more layers and more work on top later. So it's get like the minimum viable product done for your work, and then add on the sprinkles, the extra 20%, that last 20% at the end. The next barrier that I want to talk about is a lack of support and understanding, especially culturally competent support. That's especially important for us Black and Brown folks in academia. So this is from that same paper from 2018 in Nature that talked about the high rates of anxiety and depression in grad students. And it showed the relationship between a good advising relationship and mental health. So the better your relationship with your advisor, the more mentorship they provide and the more help they can give you for your career, the less likely you are to have anxiety or depression. So when you're thinking about mentorship in grad school, I would recommend networking at conferences and on social media if you find that you don't mesh well with your advisor at your home institution, especially if you're looking for a Black or brown mentor and you don't have one in your department, because there are sadly too many departments that don't have any Black or brown faculty members. Reach out to people at conferences and on social media. And I would encourage you to mentally separate the roles of research advisor from mentor or advocate. So my research advisor was David Kipping. He helped me specifically with my research, but he couldn't help me with science communication or my social justice work or a lot of other things that I was interested in. For those, I have other mentors. I would consider Jedidah Eisler a mentor. I would consider people that I met in the New York comedy and science communication scenes mentors. And an advocate is something slightly different. An advocate will advocate for you. They're going to recommend you for things and lift you up when you're not in the room. And I would consider Lindell an excellent advocate of mine. So mentally separate those roles. That way, you don't get disappointed when you have one person who can't meet all of these criteria, because it's probably going to be pretty rare to find one person who can help you with your research in whatever small niche field you're interested in, and also help you with your career and also advocate for you when you're out of the room. Those are different skill sets. Unfortunately, you might have to commit to setting your own path. You might have to just build up the armor that it will require to be the first person to graduate from your department as a Black person, the first person to do the specific type of research you want or get the grant you want or whatever. Unfortunately, this is just going to be the reality until we don't have any more firsts. And hopefully that'll be soon. If you're not specifically interested, or if you're not specifically worried about mentorship, a lack of mentorship, and you're more worried about family and friends not understanding or supporting you in academia, here's some advice for you. This is especially relevant to people who are the first in their family to go to college or grad school. And this article talks about first-gen students. But a lot of this concern, at least in my experience, I am not a first-gen student. My mom has a PhD in English, but I am the first person in my family to go to elite institutions and study science. And so one thing my mom was really concerned about when I said I wanted to get a PhD in astronomy was, where's the money coming from? How are you going to survive? And so I had to explain to her that I not only had my tuition covered, but I got paid to go to grad school, which is something she did not experience in her English PhD program. So explain your funding situation. If your family doesn't understand your research, and probably a lot of them won't, none of mine do, treat interactions with your loved ones as opportunities to practice psychom. What better way could you have of, one, connecting with your family, and two, practicing these skills that are valuable for all scientists, regardless of whether you want to go into psychom or academia. And then there's just this unwelcome nature of academia that we have to deal with, the competitiveness, the opacity, the hierarchical structure. And here's just a few pieces of advice that I hope you keep in your mind as you go through grad school. One is that if you're still motivated to get the PhD, excellent. That is fantastic. But if you don't want to deal with a lot of the crap that you have to along the way, only show up for the necessary events. At the end of my grad school career, I stopped going to most of the talks that I wasn't interested in. I didn't go to seminars unless I knew that I would enjoy the content, or unless there was food. I definitely went to events where there would be food, because they don't pay us well enough as grad students, and sometimes we need the free food. So only show up for necessary events. Also remember that you do not owe academia your passion or your loyalty. Too often in academia, we talk about how research is a passion, and you should be passionate about your work because then it's not really work at all. I really disagree with that. We shouldn't expect that our work is going to be our passion, because it's going to get hard. And you don't want your passion to be something that can disappear. So remember that you don't have to be passionate about your work, but you can be interested in it, but it doesn't have to be the thing that wakes you up every morning and the reason that you get out of bed. You are allowed to think about academia and treat it like it's a way to make money. You can treat academia like a 9-to-5. I did by the end of my grad school career because I was already working basically full time as a science communicator in my 5th year of grad school. So I was treating grad school as my day job, and you are definitely allowed to do the same thing. I am giving you that permission. The most fulfilling part of your life is allowed to be outside of work. It can be families or exercise, hobbies, your religious practice. These are all things that I think academia sometimes makes us feel bad for prioritizing, but you absolutely should not. Again, because you do not owe academia your loyalty and your passion. You don't owe academia anything. There are going to be a lot of times when academia is stressful. This is why I don't think we should feel pressure to make academia our passion or to tell other people that it is our passion. So when you are dealing with stress, here are some tips for how to mitigate it. And I'm separating it into 2 categories: preventative and reactive. So preventative stress management is all about making sure you don't get to this point, making sure you don't get to the point where everything feels like it's on fire. So a couple ways to prevent stress is to set firm boundaries and actually stick to them. So this, I've talked about this in a few ways. One, asking people for what you need from them, like that conversation I had with my advisor. Another way that this can manifest is, excuse me, another way that this can manifest is in setting those non-negotiable extracurricular recreational activities, like for me, bar trivia. So set firm boundaries and make sure you stick to them. Next, develop and follow a routine. I found that for me, I got a lot more stressed when my days and weeks were kind of haphazard and when every day was different. There are going to be days like that or weeks like that in academia. It's a pretty variable job by nature, but the more routine that you can set for yourself, if you can get up and go to bed at the same time every day, or if you can have regular meal times, that's a really big one. Whatever routine works for you, set it and then try to stick to it. And this is another way of setting firm boundaries. Find friends outside of school and work who are not astronomy grad students. I had a roommate who was a sociology grad student. I have a fiance. At the time when I was in grad school, I had a boyfriend who was not in academia or grad school at all. And it was really helpful to be able to talk to these people about something that wasn't a problem set or a paper or a brown dwarf. It's also really useful because so many of the people that we spend our time with are high achieving geniuses, right? We spend so much time with these people that we think it's the norm to publish a lot of papers a year or give a lot of conference talks. But in reality, that's really impressive, and that is not the norm, and that is not something that most people can say they're competent at. So spending time with people outside of academia is just a really nice reality check. I also think that you can prevent stress by cultivating an alternate source of accomplishment. So this is another way that you can remind yourself that your worth isn't tied to your productivity. This is like a hack to that. If you have hobbies, I know Tiara plays rugby, or if you really like crafting, or if you volunteer with an organization, all of those other hobbies that you have can create other opportunities for you to feel accomplished, because there are going to be times when you don't get that from your research or your academic work. Now for the reactive strategies. And this is when you feel yourself getting stressed and you need to bring yourself down from it. So the first is to know how your stress manifests. Are you the type of person who feels stress physically? Do you get really sweaty? Does your heart start beating? Do you, does your hair start to fall out? Do you feel yourself getting really lethargic and low energy? Or do you feel stress more emotionally? Do you find that you cry more easily or get angry more easily, or that you are apathetic about a lot of things? Crying's definitely one. I feel my stress emotionally for sure. So knowing how your stress manifests can help you catch it early. And if you watch any sort of medical drama on TV, you know that catching it early is one of the best ways to fight it. And then once you recognize that you are in a stressful situation, based on however your body manifests its stress, maintain the hierarchy of needs. So make sure that you are fed and have water, and that you have safety and security, and then work your way up the pyramid here. And by the time you get to the top, you'll probably be able to identify the thing that is stressing you out, and also hopefully a way to mitigate that stressful thing. And then there's this website that I have used so many times, youfeellikeshit.com. And if you go to this website, it'll just go through a list of questions like, have you eaten in the last 5 hours? Have you had a glass of water? Do you have a stressful event in your life coming up? Jessica says, taking a deep breath. This is something that not everyone can go through themselves. Like, I have a really hard time when I'm in one of my stress states, actually logically reasoning through all of these different needs that my body has. So if you are like me and you need an external assessment, then this website is really helpful. And then there are just some things that I want you to remember from this talk. Just some nuggets I want to leave you with. So the first is that grad school is hard. Definitely. A PhD is the highest academic achievement in the entire world. It should be difficult, but it should be difficult because of the learning and not the environment of grad school. Second, don't be afraid to ask for help from people you trust. This is one of the reasons establishing your own support network is so important, so that you know who you can trust and who you can ask for help. And third, you are worth so much more than the stuff you produce. Your worth is in no way tied to your research productivity or the amount of grant money you bring in. You are a human being. You mean so much. And like Dr. Shields said, if you never wrote another paper or never got another grant funded again, you would be enough. I believe you can do the thing. Positive Possum believes you can do the thing. And if you ever feel like you can't do the thing, you can always reach out to me. My email is goastromo@gmail.com, and I will tell you that you can do the thing, because you can. That's all I have. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening.